Good morning, everyone. I should say good morning, Patriots. Today is our day. Friday, finally. Happy to have a Friday. Hope you guys are as happy as I am about it being Friday. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap. Hopefully, you guys have had a really great week. I have had a really busy, crazy week. It feels strange to not have had a show for so many days. I was here on Monday, then not Tuesday, not Wednesday, not yesterday. I was really hoping to do an afternoon show one of those days, but I was just incredibly busy. And then of course I had to work last night till really good morning, Glesna. Hopefully you're having some beautiful weather there in Michigan. Last night I didn't get home till after midnight. And then, you get home, you've been at work all day, and then you're winding down. And I didn't get to sleep till about 2 in the morning. And I'm so tired this morning. I thought, man, maybe I could just do a Friday out, a later Friday show or no Friday show. But I'm like, you know what? We've got too many things to talk about today. Good morning, Allison. Hopefully you've had a great week as well. And so lots to talk about today. There's been a lot going on the past couple days. It was really hard for me to see all of these things in the news and not be able to really talk about it outside of a couple posts I had time for on social media. So it's good to be back and able to talk about some of these things. First and foremost, we have Colonel Joe Adams joining us at 8 a.m. this morning. Since I didn't have a show on Wednesday, he's so gracious to come on with us today. As you remember, on Monday, we had a pretty sobering conversation about terrorism. We're going to talk about that today, both domestic and otherwise, because terrorism has taken on an entirely new shape. It's not what most people necessarily see as terrorism. Then we have these fires in the Los Angeles area. Would that be considered domestic terrorism? I think so. I believe that all of these fires, or at least the majority of them, were committed by arson, and we'll get into that. One arrest, of course, already being made. I want to talk about distraction. There's a lot of distraction going on right now. You just don't know why some of these different stories are coming out. Are they meant to distract us? What's really going on? The drones are still there, but we don't talk about them anymore. We don't talk anymore about we just had a major terror attack in this country, domestic terror attack in this country, even though it was ISIS in New Orleans. No one's talking about that anymore, are they? We had this situation in Las Vegas, which kind of took precedence, and now no one's talking about that either. I've said the entire time I've been in radio podcasting that we are a very fickle society. We jump from one story to the next, and when we have a new shiny ball to look at, we tend to forget all of the other things going on. But there's still a lot going on out there. The drones are still happening. People just aren't talking about them. Trump, of course, yesterday made a statement about the drones. We'll get into that. Trump, of course, facing sentencing today. We'll talk about that for a very brief time. Nothing, I think I see it kind of as a non-issue. Not sure what you guys think. Greenland and Canada, Trump is not backing down. So lots to talk about. Can't wait to talk to Colonel Joe Adams at 8 a.m. As you know, Colonel Adams with the Washington Guard, and this is his heyday. There's so much going on right now, and it goes to show the need for a militia. A lot of people back in the day, I think I was on Real Talk, and I would talk about militias, and I would talk about Colonel Joe Adams, and the owner's management would be like, shush, shush, don't talk about that. Don't say the word militia. It scares the listeners. And I'm like, well, only if they're uninformed. It might scare listeners that are uninformed. Maybe people need to understand, what a true militia does. And, we're not talking about skinheads and the KKK. That's not what a militia is. And not only that, but a militia is guaranteed to us under our Constitution. It's our constitutional rights to form a militia. It's literally in the Constitution, and it's a very important part of our Constitution. And good morning, Dave in St. Louis. Hope you're having a great morning. And so, I think militias are important, and because there are so many different things they do. In the case of Colonel Joe Adams and the Washington Guard, and I'm talking about this now because once we have him on, I want to talk about what he wants to talk about with terrorism and things that he's seeing and things that he's hearing. But, let's just say the Washington Guard as an example. There's a lot of things they do. They do emergency preparedness. They have, I don't know, hundreds of members. And let's just say that one of those members has some type of mishap. Well, guess what? They have the entirety of the National Guard I don't know, the Washington Guard. I don't know why I always call them National Guard. I think it's so easy to say. The Washington Guard behind them. If you're Allison, as an example, I know you're a member of the Washington Guard, and I'll tell you, if something happened to you, if your home was burned in a fire, like what's going on in Los Angeles, the group would rally behind you. And for you strangers out there that are not part of the Washington Guard, well, guess what? They would rally behind you also. When there's a storm, when they need cleanup, if there's some type of a catastrophe, these people train every single day to, materialize, to gather, to make sure that they get out to these hard hit areas. But of course, being part of the group, they take care of themselves first, as they should, because if they don't take care of themselves, then they can't take care of anyone else. So a militia is not just about grabbing guns and going out and preparing for a revolution. It is about so much more. So much more. And a good morning, Sharna. And do I think there's going to be a global lockdown? I don't know. I'm going to say I don't know. I think that after seeing what they did to us during COVID, I think they'll try. Will there actually be a lockdown? No, because most people I know would say absolutely 100% no. We learned the last time, but sadly, a good portion of the people out there still think that we need a lockdown. We have a lot of different viruses going around. The viruses are real. No one's saying they're not. COVID was real. No one was saying that it wasn't real, of course. And I was actually really angry yesterday about COVID. I was thinking in hearing these different news reports and HMPV and avian flu, and I came across a chicken website that I'm part of a group, because I have some chickens, which I probably shouldn't tell anyone because they'll be coming for me. In the UK, in the UK, you have to register your poultry now. If you have any type of bird in the UK that lays eggs, you have to register them with the government. And that better never happen here. And yesterday I was driving around thinking about all of these things that are going on and these new viruses, and how they're talking about, oh, avian flu, it's killed its first person in Louisiana. And, it's very little, there's very little threat to you, quite honestly, for avian flu. If you're not handling dead birds, then I don't think you have a lot to worry about. And the same with HMPV. It's kind of a non-issue, but they make it into a bigger issue than it is. And I will tell you, yesterday I was driving around, and just by accident, I was on my way to work, and I completely forgot this place was even there. I kind of blocked it out of my mind. Was Evelyn's house. If you're familiar in the St. Louis area, it's a hospice facility. And my grandmother, 92 years old, and she, during the peak of COVID, was in a nursing home. My mom had to have surgery. I have to work every day. We had no choice. She was just in the nursing home temporarily while my mother recovered from the surgery, because she was getting some dementia. And, we would catch her walking and trying to do these different things. And it just wasn't safe for her to be in a situation where she wasn't watched, around the clock. And she was very ill at the time. And we hated it. We didn't want to do it. We didn't have a choice, and it was really hard. And those last couple of days, we were hoping that we would be able to get her out of that nursing home before she passed away. And she ended up in this Evelyn's house. Anyway, I drove by there on purely by accident yesterday, and I saw it, and it just brought all these memories back to me of what they did to us during COVID. Here was a situation where my grandmother, we kept her home as long as we possibly could. And, I had to go to the nursing home and talk to her through a window. And there, towards the end, she wouldn't come to the window anymore. She had a hard time holding the phone up, to her face. And I'll never forgive them, for what they did to us. I will never forgive them. My son's father, in the hospital, of course, with COVID, and passed away. And you can't even go in and see your loved one. You can't be there with them, and it's really hard. And I don't know about you guys, but I will never forgive what our government did to us. And I will tell you one thing: if they even think about lockdowns, if they even consider telling us we have to wear masks all the time, and that's happening. Some states are already telling people you have to wear a mask. I'm telling you right now, it's not going to happen for me. It is not going to happen for me. And I don't think it's going to happen for most of you either. And I'm telling you right now, if they try to tell you that your loved one is in a nursing home and you can't see them, that you have to talk to them through an outside window, you better raise some hell because I'm going to raise it for you. And if they tell me, we have to stay in our home, guess what? I'm going to grab all of my stuff and I'm going to go outside of my home and I'm going to go to all of the places they tell us we can't go. And we all need to, because we will never allow that to happen to us again. Never. We can't. We can't allow it to happen. And people in China have uploaded videos on social media. So there isn't no virus, just the news media making, of course, it's the news media making it a big deal. And, and hopefully Donald Trump will protect us from that. He said he wants to tell us what the drones are about, and I think day number 1 in office. And I know during COVID time, there's a lot of people who are upset with Trump over his policies during COVID. But, the way I see it is that Donald Trump, he is not a doctor. He's not a medical expert. He never has ever claimed to be one. And I think he was like the rest of us. We were learning as we go along. And in his position, he has to count on the medical experts to tell him the truth. And it's highly unfortunate that the medical experts, let's say Dr. Fauci, of course, should be in prison right now in Gitmo, but he's not. Maybe he will be at some point. He'll probably get a pardon soon. Joe Biden considering a pardon for Fauci. As a matter of fact, I was on my agenda to talk about today, and some other people preemptive pardons. They should all be in prison. I think it's treason. They met with Donald Trump. They gave him incorrect advice intentionally with the objective of controlling the American people. And I hate it that Trump didn't see through that and that he didn't say, hey, we're not going to do this in our country. But he thought he was doing the right thing. So I don't really fault him for it in the end, but I will tell you, it will never happen again. It will never happen again. We've all woke up. We all know. And I think that's why, the situation with the fires in the Los Angeles area and the terrorism and things that are taking place right now, we're all very aware of what's going on. We might be a little fickle and we might get tired of one subject and move on to another, but we don't forget. And I think that's extremely important for us as Americans is that we do not forget. Good morning, Karen. Allison says the Washington Guard trains you to be able to sustain self, family, and community during natural disasters and civil unrest and to assist first responders. Absolutely so. And Allison, that's exactly why I think militias are so important. And I do wish that there was one in every community. And when after Hurricane Helene hit, if for some of you who were, following along with me back then, I was in Georgia for 42 days trying to get out the vote for Donald Trump, going door to door canvassing. And I was in North Carolina in the Blue Ridge Mountains, of course, when Helene hit. And it was extremely devastating. And I met a lot of people there and talked to a lot of different people who were heavily affected. And at that time, guess what they were doing? They were forming their own, quasi militias. They might not have called themselves a militia, but that's exactly what they were doing. People would tell me, hey, I have gathered together with my community, the people on my street or the people around me or my family, and we have decided that as a group, we are better and safer in numbers. And the reason why is because there were looters. There were people running around, and that's exactly what you can expect in any type of natural disaster or otherwise, maybe even a terror attack. And then what you're going to do is you're going to need to conserve resources. You're going to have to combine resources. It is certainly safety in numbers if you trust the people that you're, of course, confined with. And what do you think happens when we have a natural disaster or when we have let's say, a terror attack or something else that takes place? Is that people are not prepared. Largely, Americans are not prepared. And what are they going to do? Well, survival is number one. Your survival instinct is number one. The very first thing they're going to do is they're going to come for what you have because you are prepared. They want to survive. And therefore, they will do whatever it takes to make sure that they and their family survives. And that will be robbing you. It could be killing you. It could be a lot of different things because people do desperate things in desperate times. And I don't think we could ever forget that. And that's why a militia or a group is extremely important. And people don't often realize that until the disaster has already hit. And then you start thinking, gosh, I'm really vulnerable sitting here in my house by myself or with my family. Who is going to protect me? I may only have so many weapons. I may only have so much ammunition. I'm not prepared. I only have so much food. What am I going to do? And then of course the people who aren't prepared, they're coming for you. So you've got a lot of things to worry about. Matter of fact, sounds like the movie Homestead, doesn't it? That new Angel Network movie Homestead. I haven't seen that yet, but I plan to. Good morning, Rob Curtis. And and look at the fires in Los Angeles. What do you think is happening? Looting. There's a lot of different rumors going around, about those fires. And I'm going to talk about it a little bit now. We don't have a lot of time before Colonel Joe Adams joins us. I'll probably talk about it again towards the end of the show. But, the fires are, in my opinion, intentional. I consider it an act of terrorism, domestic terrorism, I believe, but I do consider it an act of terrorism. And the reason why is because from day one, the morning I woke up, what was that, Tuesday morning? Woke up and all of these fires had started. And I thought, gosh, this is terrible. I know a lot of people who live in this area. I've spent a lot of time in different parts of California, particularly in the Malibu region. And, somebody I consider to be a good friend lives in Malibu, right there on the Pacific Coast Highway on the beach. And I thought, man, these are very close, to his home, very close to some of the other people that I know. And, I obviously certainly going to pay attention anytime we have a wildfire taking place. And one of the first things I saw online was people saying, hey, oh, I saw the people who started this fire. Let's say the Palisades over there in Pacific Palisades. Somebody online said, I think they said two or three people. They didn't say if it was men or women, starting these fires. And they approached these people and said, what are you doing? What do you can't do this. And their response was, oh, this is for the betterment of the community, or this is to make things better. I don't recall the exact words this person, said that these people said, but I do believe it's arson. And then we have the was it the Griffith fire? No, am I saying that right? Kenneth fire. Sorry, the Kenneth fire. So the Kenneth fire, have actually made an arrest, and this is interesting to me because they said homeless. They said they arrested a homeless man, but this man had a blowtorch and he started the fire with a blowtorch. I mean, maybe homeless people have blowtorches. I don't know. But it seems a little suspicious to me. And quite honestly, it seems like the antics of Antifa. And I know there have been fires in the past in California. I've seen the videos of the people starting the fire who certainly looked like Antifa. And what is the goal of Antifa is A, to attack capitalism, and B, is to cause chaos. And that is exactly what is happening in this situation. It is absolutely causing chaos, and it is certainly attacking capitalism. All of the areas that are involved right now in these Los Angeles area fires are very wealthy neighborhoods. Malibu, some of these neighborhoods in Malibu and in Pacific Palisades are some of the wealthiest communities in the entire country, possibly in the entire world. I know for a fact, I visited my friend who lives in this area in Malibu Colony. It's where all of the movie stars live. It's just a couple little streets in this little enclave right there in, off the PCH. And now they were not largely hit by fire yet. The fire kind of took the other direction. But I'll tell you, just that little tiny neighborhood, it would have been billions of dollars just for that little tiny neighborhood. I think as we move forward and we start finding out what the actual tally is, I think it's going to probably be well over $100 billion, probably closer to $200 billion is my best guess. Because when you go there and you see that the majority of these houses are over $5, 6, 7 million, up to one house was $85 million that burned, it's going to be a lot of damage. And groups like Antifa, their goal again is to attack capitalism. They're not Democrats. They're funded by Democrats. They are not Democrats. They are not certainly not Republicans. But they attack everyone. They're anti-government. Remember when Nancy Pelosi's house was vandalized and they put that pig? They drew the pig, and left a pig head on her by her garage. Well, that's what Antifa does, and that meant capitalist pig. That's why they did that, capitalist pig, because they don't like anyone who believes in capitalism. They believe in communism. They don't want people to be wealthy, so therefore they're going to attack the wealthiest neighborhoods. And I don't know how these fires are going to affect us in the end, because economically it's going to be very difficult. I've heard that a lot of these homes probably can't be rebuilt. Certainly not, maybe not rebuilt in this area. And remember when the fire took place in Lahaina? Remember when the hurricane took place in the, of course, the massive landslides in North Carolina? Well, guess what? Homes aren't being built in those areas. And matter of fact, in North Carolina, FEMA came out and said, we'll never rebuild in these areas. It doesn't matter that you own this property or that you used to live here. It's not safe to rebuild. Lahaina, Lahaina right now, of course, in Hawaii is completely blocked off. You can't even access that land at all. People who used to live there, they have no access to where their home used to be. It's blocked off and guarded. And that's probably going to happen here in California too. And, again, I don't have a lot of time to talk about this because we're going to have Colonel Joe Adams join us here in just a couple moments. But I'll tell you, there's a lot going on with these California fires. I think that we're going to see a lot of additional talk. Lives first. Lives first. I believe there's been 10 people confirmed dead at this point. I think there will be many more casualties. A lot of people missing at this point. A lot of people stayed thinking they could put the fires out, and of course, that's very dangerous thinking. And you saw how rapidly they were saying that I think it was the Palisades fire, that it was moving a football field like every minute, something along those lines. I mean, that's insane. The spread of this fire was just outrageous. I don't see how people could have possibly escaped it in some cases. And if you're familiar with that area, if you're up in the mountains, up in the canyons, there's one or two or three roads that come down, and they all come out to the Pacific Coast Highway. And the Pacific Coast Highway is 2 lanes going in either direction. And like I said, I've spent a lot of time in that area. And on a regular day, traffic can be really bad, especially in the area between Santa Monica and Malibu. And on a regular day, it's really bad. Can you imagine all of these people fleeing the canyon and heading down to Pacific Coast Highway and everyone trying to get out? People had to leave their vehicles behind and make a run for it. It was a pretty crazy situation. And I think we'll see a lot more. And I'll talk about it a little bit again, at the end of the show after we talk to Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard, because people are talking about, hey, let's compare this to smart cities. Is this the way they usher in smart cities, into the Los Angeles area? These were areas allegedly zoned to become smart cities. And what better way to implement that than to wipe everything out? What better way for people who hate capitalism to create chaos than to wipe out some of the most beautiful, most expensive homes in our country? And then how are these people going to rebuild? Insurance companies canceled their policies quite some time ago for a lot of these people because they were in a area that was at a high risk for fire. And where are we going to get all the building supplies? There's already a shortage of building supplies. How are these people going to rebuild? Where are they going to live in the interim? Thousands upon thousands of people. Patty says, is FEMA involved in California? Oh, of course, Patty. FEMA will be right in the middle of all that. Good morning, Robert, and good morning, Margie. Yeah, Margie says the government will give them $750. Good morning, Lori. And she says, yes, coincidentally aligned with the Santa Ana windstorm. Yeah, and these are winds that they said, they haven't seen in 20 years, and I'll get into that later towards the end of the show. Good morning, Linda, because I think that has a lot to do with the planetary alignment, which people tell us, oh, that doesn't mean anything, but it certainly does have to do with our weather. I'm going to be grabbing Colonel Joe Adams here very quickly, of course, with the Washington Guard. Colonel Joe Adams, we're going to be coming to you. Good morning, Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard. How are you doing this morning?
Really good. It is a good morning, and Happy New Year to all the listeners out there. I know that you appreciate them. I appreciate them too. And boy, there's a lot of news to cover. So let's get going. What do you got on your mind, Tabitha?
Well, first and foremost, Colonel Adams, what I want to ask you, and this is just your opinion, I want to talk to you about terrorism. We had a very sobering conversation Monday on the show about terrorism, what terrorism looks like, what we can expect. I call 2025 the year of terrorism. And I'm curious if you think or would consider these Los Angeles area fires an act of terrorism.
Oh, without a doubt. Without a doubt. If they did initially start the fires, the people who hate us, then what I told my wife, I said, the bad guys, our enemies, are watching these fires. What a easy tool to use for terrorism. The conditions were perfect out there, and the government in charge out there knew that they were sitting on a tinderbox, instead of spending the money to get those hydrants, make sure everything works in those remote areas, they spent their money on supporting illegal entries in the United States. I mean, they should be held accountable. You know,
Yeah,
the Washington
absolutely.
Guard, the Washington Guard prepares for the worst case scenario. What's the worst thing that could happen? Anything less than that, okay, we're ready. But you've got to prepare the community for the worst case scenario. And frankly, they didn't do it, and we're suffering for it. Those fires, if they started naturally, is one thing, but after that, some of those other fires are very suspicious. And I guess they've already picked up one guy. And when they talk about South American gangs, I don't know why they dodged the word cartel. Anyway, we'll see what happens. If we ever know the real truth, it'll be a miracle. But yeah, our enemies paid attention to this. In fact, this is go back to World War II. The Japanese tried to do the same thing. They tried to set fire to California and Montana. They set in thousands of incendiary balloons into this country, but their timing was off because of the war. They had to launch those balloons at that period of time. And if they would have had the perfect conditions like California's under right now with no rain for months, then it might have been a different story. But those balloons landed in Canada, along the west coast, inland, and only one of them really caused any damage. And it was the balloon was hung up in a tree, and a young family approached it and detonated, and some people lost their lives. But their plan was to set fire in World War II to the west coast, but the conditions weren't perfect, and it didn't work out. And most people don't know. In fact, the government, when that family was injured or killed, that actually found one of the balloons and investigated it and blew themselves up.
Oh, wow.
The government withheld that information intentionally, not to cause panic and terrorism on the West Coast.
Colonel Adams, I had no idea. I had no idea that ever happened. But I will tell you something that I almost forgot to mention because we talked about the one arrest that was allegedly a person with a homeless person with a blowtorch, if you can believe that. But I forgot they made another arrest last night that I was reading about, and what you said reminded me of it. Is it was a gang member, somebody who was here in our country illegally, and they said that this gang was starting fires intentionally to rob people and to loot their homes. So they would start a fire. They were caught starting a fire. And then, as soon as the fire began and people started evacuating, they were running into these people's homes with giant bags and vehicles driving through the roads and just taking as much as they possibly could.
Well, when this thing first started, I asked my wife, I said, how long is before the looting is going to start? So there was
Immediately.
actually looting taking place that was never publicized because it would create panic in the community. We're only getting bits and pieces of actually what's going on. But, the cartel's been using these tactics for years along the border. I mean, every year there's mountain fires that's intentionally set by the cartels as a diversionary tactics when they're bringing big loads across. So this is nothing new. But somehow, some way, our enemies are involved in these fires. Maybe on a small scale. I'm not saying they started them, but they promoted them. Let's just say that.
I couldn't agree with you more because every report I've read has stated multiple witnesses have seen arsonists start this fire, and that's nothing new. I would say the majority of California wildfires, despite what the government wants to tell you, they want to say, oh, it's because of power lines. Power lines do start fires, of course, and have contributed to some degree, of course. But I think more than anything, most of these fires are committed by arsonists or people who unintentionally set a fire because they're camping and not paying attention. And and the other thing, Colonel Adams, that I wanted to make sure we talked about today, because again, we had this very sobering conversation on Monday. We were talking about terrorism and the rise of ISIS. Of course, many of us know that's happening because of the caliphate in Syria didn't come to their fruition because of us. We put Al Qaeda in charge instead of ISIS, and now ISIS, they claim they want the United States to be their next caliphate. We hear these reports where they all of a sudden they have suicide vests that can't be detected by X-ray. They can't see them at the airport, and they have explosives that can't be detected in the typical ways. And we have a lot of threats against us right here and our country. And I really just want to get your thoughts on that.
That material that can't be detected has been around for a long time on a smaller base. But yeah, there is such a device. But our security at the airports are a joke anyway. I mean, people are still sneaking on board and getting flights internationally. I mean, it's just people don't see with security. Security is a pain in the ass. I mean, do you even have to put an alarm system in your home? Well, that's burdenous. People don't like that. They like their freedom.
Right.
Unfortunately, we're living in different times now, and the rules have changed. But let me just inject this: the number one uh, ally of our enemies and the terrorists is the media. So when we discussed about the suspicious, all those cameras on that street down there in New Orleans, the, uh, the public cameras, the police cameras monitoring that area were on. Were on. Now, this guy was a lone wolf, obviously, as of now, and if he would have lived after that and found out those cameras were off, he'd have been upset. He thought that he wanted the cameras on. He wanted the publicity. They turned a lone wolf supposedly situation in New Orleans to a world event because of the media.
Right. And he actually intended to live stream his attack. He had on Google Glasses, but for some reason they failed to record. But his intention was to wear these Google Glasses and to record the entire attack. And he was going to live stream it. So I 100% agree with you. He wanted the media attention. I have tried my best not to even say his name because that's what he wanted. He said that's what he wanted. He originally was going to murder his family, and then he decided that wouldn't get enough attention for ISIS. So he decided the only way to get attention on ISIS was to create this, insane terror attack, which, many lives lost, over a dozen lives lost. And the media doesn't even talk about it anymore. I was just saying earlier how fickle the media is. We diverted our attention from a terror attack in New Orleans to the Cybertruck in Las Vegas, which was to me nothing but a giant distraction, and now we have these wildfires, and it's just one attack after the other. And Colonel Adams, I really do think going into 2025, we're going to face a lot of serious situations with terrorism, both domestic and internationally.
That's the new war. The war on terrorism is not over. It's just started. Uh, the one thing that nobody's mentioned in the media that I know of, okay? People are wondering this Green Beret who committed this uh, I don't know this staged act in Las Vegas using Tesla and the Trump hotel. People say, well, how is it possible that a American military personnel, especially that high up with that kind of clearance, why would he do that? Why would he do that? It can't happen. It's got to be a conspiracy. But nobody has mentioned the Oklahoma City bombing.
Right. That's right.
They you, no one's mentioned Timothy McVeigh, which they couldn't execute fast enough, and his co-partner in conspiracy is still in prison. Timothy McVeigh was pissed off at the government.
Yes.
That's why he did what he did. He killed all those people to make a statement. We're sick of you. I know how you operate. I know what you're doing. We're not a democracy anymore. That's what the Oklahoma City bombing was about. This guy that put the fireworks, and I like the way he added a little bit of racing fuel in there too, uh, to make a statement. And is that your PTSD or whatever? I mean, I don't know, but this was an intended statement by frustrated people within the military, within the know, and to make a statement and wake people up. Wake people up. That was his
I
objective.
agree. And
Yeah.
Colonel Adams, I don't think most people realize the number of suicides that take place in our United States military. And years ago, I met a man who was a general, and he, talked to me in confidence, and he told me that he left the military because he couldn't handle the suicide numbers. And he said that it was widely underreported in the media, that the actual suicide numbers are so much higher than what we know. The PTSD is so much higher than what we know.
Right, and with Border Patrol too. At last count, I've lost 23 of my brother Border Patrol agents to suicide because they're frustrated. It makes them they lose their minds. They're retiring early. They're quitting. They're walking out the door. We can't get recruits for Border Patrol. Of course, now that things changed now with the uh, the elections and the Border Patrol said the same thing to me when Trump got elected. The sky is blue again. Well, the sky is back blue. In fact, this last mission that the Washington Guard just ran, security for a gun show here in Washington, it was Operation Blue Sky, which was because of Donald Trump's election. So, but he's not in office yet. Let's hope they don't kill him. So, but
We've still got a couple of very tense days ahead of us, and I do wonder if these Los Angeles area fires were started intentionally, right around this time. We know these people want to cause chaos, and I know people are going to say, "Oh, it might have been an accident." I absolutely believe it was arson. I absolutely believe it was maybe a homeless person, maybe Antifa like folks, maybe gangs, attempting to loot people. I don't know. But
you
either
know,
way, I consider it terrorism regardless of any of those explanations.
sure, it's definitely arson on some level. Period. Whether they
And, you know,
started
and
or not, yeah.
And then we have, of course, like as you said, Donald Trump facing sentencing today. I think that'll be a non-issue. I think it'll be caught up in peels, the entire time, of course, he's in office. But it just goes to show they're not going down as lightly as they said they would. Remember how Democrats, they all said, oh, it's going to be an easy transition of power. They are making it anything but easy.
Yeah, more so than we know. I mean, even the sentencing today, that comes out of the White House. I don't care if you're talking about the DOJ or whatever. That's coming out of anything that they can do, anything they can do to negatively. But they haven't learned because everything they do to Donald Trump comes back to haunt them. I mean, they're the best publicity Donald Trump's ever had. Everything they do is wrong, and the people caught on and elected him because they realize now all of these bills and programs by the Biden administration hurt America, and they were all fabricated. So they paid the price. Now we're in charge. We'll see how that goes. And they're still going to get in everything they can do to hurt him. They're going to continue to do it. Yeah, the sentencing today should be interesting because I thought it was going to be put off until after his uh, presidency, but it should be interesting today. I don't know what to expect out of
It
it.
will be interesting. And Colonel Adams, it worries me because, it's not that they're just after Trump. They're after us because their main goal is to control us all. Trump is standing in the way. I consider it a lot like what we've seen in other countries. Trump, it is a coup. We replaced the Democrat regime, and they're not going to go down lightly. I really have no idea what they have in store for us. I certainly think they have something. And I don't know what you think, but I believe Obama created ISIS. And I believe our CIA has created a lot of terror groups, including the Taliban, ISIS, and so many others. And now we're facing a year ahead of us, especially with Donald Trump in office, because ISIS, they don't want Donald Trump in office. They know what he will certainly go against them, and his policies will go against them. What do you have to say to people who are feel like sometimes like I do, like I don't want to leave my house, I don't want to go to public events, I don't want to, I quite honestly, I was on the highway the other day and there were all these trucks. I thought, any one of these trucks could be a weapon of mass destruction. We just don't know what's ahead of us. But how do people prepare for the unpreparable?
Well, I used to teach a class for the embassies around the planet, and it was like living comfortably in living defensively in a dangerous environment, and it's tricky when your liberties are taken away, uh, like with the Patriot Act. So it's a it's not American, but part of the byproduct of these terrorists is terrorism and putting fear in people. The fires, they put fear in people, and you can't succumb to that. You just have to prepare for it and be able to fight. That's all. Uh, I've never let my guard down, and I teach that at the guard. Don't let your guard down. Take a second look. That, unfortunately, is the world that we live in now, and it's going to get worse before it gets better. But thank God we've got Donald Trump in there, unless they. I worry more about them killing him. There's groups right now sitting there planning how to kill our president,
Yes.
and more than one, who don't communicate with each other.
And they have the weapons to do it. I've explained many times on this show, the United States, we sell weapons, or we give weapons. We don't sell them. We give weapons to Ukraine. Most of those weapons, I've heard 60% of the weapons that go to Ukraine never make it to the troops in Ukraine. They get sold on the black market to, guess who? Terrorists. And then those weapons come down, they come across our southern border, and they're here in the United States. I heard heat-seeking missiles. They want to take Trump out with heat-seeking missiles. That's been some of the chatter. And, I can't even imagine. He doesn't have to do this for us. He's doing it because he loves his country.
Well, Trump knew about the missiles, the Iranian missiles. Somebody asked me the other day, well, what about the launchers? Well, these are shoulder holds,
Yes.
just like we give to the Mujahideen when they were our allies in Afghanistan. In fact, I was part of it's kind of the middleman on some of those purchases of the heat seekers. And anyway, I'm fairly certain through my sources that the cartel has brought in Iranian missiles into this country. Now, I find it very strange that early in his campaign for this election, Donald Trump didn't use Trump 1. He didn't use his own airplanes. I don't know if you people knew that or not. He chartered aircraft. And why would he do that? Because he also got wind there's a good chance they're going to try and shoot down Trump. And they knew that, in fact, the missiles that came in this country from Iran went through a normal border crossing and went through customs and went through border protection, and they got in. Now, how do they know that? Because they got the couriers. The FBI got the couriers who actually brought the missiles in. And when they were taken to the safe house where the missiles were delivered, they were gone.
I didn't know that. I knew that they knew. I knew that they knew somehow, but I didn't know the backstory.
So, like a lot of times when we flew our private plane, you can block out your tail number. In other words, you can file a form to where you can go on right now on a website and track every plane in the air, where it came from, and what their flight plan is. Well, during those times, Donald Trump's charter aircraft, all the tail numbers were not legitimately accessed. You couldn't get his flight plan and all that. Now, why did he do that? He had aircraft. He did it because a little bird told him, hey, man, we got some missiles across the border, and they could take down an aircraft. That's why he used chartered airplanes.
Makes absolute sense. And, and then that threat, Colonel Adams, that threat will continue.
Recently, Muslims around the world were celebrating what their brothers did in New Orleans around the world. And we continue to let them in this country. Why? It's insanity. And we all know the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again with the same outcome. So we continue to import the enemy. We continue to allow them to cross the border illegally, which they're still doing about 2,500 a day. People think about that. The Biden administration is still promoting and flying in people we don't have any idea what their intentions are. And I've said it before, you cannot vet what's in a person's heart, period.
You're right.
Anyway, it continues to this day. And I guess
and they don't do, and Colonel Adams, our government does nothing against radicalization. And I've explained on the show in the past that what happens is that we have a mosque, here in the United States. Let's say, as an example, right there in Beaumont, Texas, which is where Jabbar was born and raised. There's a mosque there. It becomes radicalized. In this case, the mosque that Jabbar belonged to, the imam there had said, he spoke out about radicalization in his mosque, and he was fired for speaking out. By the way, same mosque members that raised about $400,000 for Hillary Clinton in her campaign, and then later in 2019 raised about the same amount for Joe Biden. And we know that what happens with radicalization is radicalization spreads out. It starts around the blocks of the mosque, and then it spreads out from there. And Now we're talking about online radicalization, not just in the mosques, and it spreads like wildfire.
Every mosque in this country, in one way, shape, or form, is connected to terrorist activities. 100%. The FBI knows it, the CIA knows it, and we do nothing about it. Now, we've infiltrated those mosques, and we know what's going on inside. So if you uh, radical people out there that go to mosques, we're on to you. We're on to you. You're not fooling anybody. Now, why the government doesn't just get rid of them, I don't know. So if I
I
was
don't
in
I don't
charge,
understand it either.
I'd close them all tomorrow.
Well,
Someday historians will look back and go, "What the hell were we thinking?
I agree
We
completely.
invited the snake into our tent, even though we knew it was a snake." Period.
I could not agree more. You know, we're facing some very difficult times, and I was really happy to talk to you today. I hated that I didn't have a show for a couple days after our big talk on terrorism on Monday, and I know people certainly look to you for advice. And it's a scary time, I think, for all of us. And we saw what happened in New Orleans, and we know that the terrorists, their cells are in our country. I would say, Colonel Adams, that they're probably certainly in every big city. I think they're in a lot of smaller cities. You know, the state of Tennessee recently stated that they have Venezuelan gang members in every city in the state of Tennessee, which is really unbelievable that that's happened, but it has allegedly happened. And I think it's the same, you know, for Islamic terrorist cells. They're here. They're already here in our country. And a lot of people think that they've received their call to activate and that they are actively planning terror acts against us, first in the airports, because we're most vulnerable in the airports, secondly, on our military bases, and then thirdly, against the American people. And it's to me, it's a very scary time that we're heading into.
Very scary, but get used to it. And it's hard to say to how do you get used to something like that? You can adapt. I mean, I live my life like that, and it doesn't bother me. I'm just used to it. But we're getting ready to go through some scary times. But so the media thing is nothing more than an extension of the terrorist plan to put fear to put fear in people, like here in Franklin County. People are scared of what's going to happen. Well, that's part of terrorism. Don't play into that.
Right.
I say bring it. I mean, let's get it over with. Let's get this party started. But we're in very strange times. And the other thing is, Donald Trump winning the elections is a fantastic thing for for our democracy, our freedoms. But it's also creating a false sense of what's going on around us. The Donald Trump's going to do the best that he can to regain those freedoms and parts of democracy that's been eroded. But by him being elected, people are letting their guard down, and that's even more dangerous. I'll give you an example. Prior to his election, uh, I had an MRE salesman, meals ready to eat, who couldn't keep enough MREs in. In fact, the Midwest was sold out. Now these people that sell MREs and all this survival food are practically giving it away because people have stopped buying it because Donald Trump's been elected and they think he's going to fix everything. Well, he's not going to fix one factor, and that's at some place, sometime, you're going to be on your own.
That's right. And sooner rather than later.
I spent the afternoon yesterday meeting with the sheriff here in Franklin County, and we had some very interesting conversations. And he also is concerned the fact that just because Donald Trump's been elected, that doesn't remove the factor of being on your own. We were talking about catastrophic events and how the Washington Guards interfaced with the sheriff's department here. What we have here in Franklin County, first of all, is a very, very rare situation in this country. Never before has a standing militia has been brought in to a law enforcement department and asked, could you help us? Will you assist us? Now, could they do that without us? Yeah, but we make them stronger because we prepare our people to be prepared to be on their own for a period of time till help arrives. Do you know how effective that is when law enforcement, when you've got 1,000 people with a tornado coming through saying we need help, but my people can take care of themselves until help arrives. the workload that takes away from the emergency responders and the sheriff's department, you can't buy that. If other countries and other counties would do the same damn thing. Oh, and by the way, one of the Washington Guard's objectives is we're going to expand our operations into adjoining counties and also assist them in their emergency response. So we're expanding. We have to. If you don't grow, you become stagnant. So we're going to further expand. There's also some conversations about some chapters of the Washington Guard being formed in other states. To me, that's a pain in the ass. I got better things to do right here. My dedication is to Missouri, Franklin County, and surrounding counties. And I've got a meeting next week with a police chief and a police chief in a municipality in St. Louis County. So we're actually going to St. Louis County. So we're expanding, and with the same message: be prepared, be on your own for amount of time until help arrives, and that's what we're all about.
And I'm glad to hear about, the possibilities of expanding, because as you know, and as folks have told you that, we need another 1,000 Washington Guards. We certainly do. And Colonel Adams, I don't have to tell you that every single day the government is working against us, through telling us, oh, there's viruses spreading. We've got to kill your chickens. We've got to lock you down. We've got to, you can't collect rainwater. They're putting all of these crazy chemicals into our foods, and I'm fully convinced most of our foods are poison. And and I see more signs of that every single day. Then we have weather manipulation and all these crazy things are going on. I feel like it's a constant battle, us against the government. And as Mr. Perno said on the comment line, the majority of people want the government to save them, and there is no one coming to save us. We have to save ourselves. We have Donald Trump to write fantastic policy for us and to place things a little bit more in our favor. But we have to save ourselves, because even though Donald Trump might be our president, the deep state is still operating against us.
And,
And
and
in
that'll
this case, through terrorism.
and that'll continue. Where at what point in time did the American people finally wake up and go, hey, you know something? We can't trust our government.
I remember when I woke up.
I mean, it hasn't been that long ago. It
Not
used
for
to
me.
be, what Ronald Reagan say, the worst sentence you could ever hear is like, don't worry about it. The government's here to help you or here to save you. Ha, right. No, wrong. Uh, anyway, what? Oh, I'm getting past notes here. Anyway, terrorism and tyranny is about the same thing, on the same page, And tyranny comes from people waiting for the government to help them. We are right now faced with a tyrannical government, tyranny. We were close to a revolution. In fact, a very high up person in Donald Trump's transition team said, if in fact Donald Trump's assassinated, this country is going to come apart.
Yes, they don't rule out revolution yet. Don't rule it out yet, because we're still teetering on the edge.
If one thing history's taught us, the only way to topple a tyrannical government is revolution, not civil war, revolution. A few weeks ago, were so close to a revolution in this country. You can't even imagine how close. But
I do. When I was Colonel Adams, when I was in Georgia, up in the Blue Ridge Mountains, and I was going door to door, trying to get out the vote for Donald Trump, people told me they were ready. They said, if he does not win this election, if they cheat again, we're prepared. We're coming down from these mountains and nothing can stop us. I mean, man, I just got chills thinking about it, how close. And, and like you just stated, if we hasn't been inaugurated yet, we still have a few more days. And then after he's inaugurated, how I don't believe for 1 minute that the deep state is just going to let him become president and then make rules to make sure they don't ever come into power again. And I think we're in store for a wild ride.
no, Donald Trump being elected is a ceasefire. The war continues. He is a ceasefire, and in a ceasefire, two things happen. You You can maneuver your troops around for a better location, or you reload. And so we're in a period of time right now of a ceasefire of a war within this country, within this government. Ceasefire. The war is not over. It'll continue. It'll start up again in some form, because the enemy, the people who hate Donald Trump, the enemy, are either reloading or repositioning their troops. So that's the concept. We are at war.
We are at war. And Colonel Adams, I don't know what you think about this. I'll be curious of your opinion. And I apologize. I know I'm keeping you a long time because I feel like I have so many things I want to talk to you about. But I feel that the deep state, obviously not going to just lay down and give up power. I think they have reverted their power to groups like ISIS and other gangs and terror groups. And they're going to fight us. If they can't fight us through the government, they're going to fight us on the streets. And I know for a fact that the ACLU is gearing up right now as we speak. They're gearing up to hold massive, massive protests all across the country over deportations. They've got lawsuits they're ready to file. I've already seen the advertisements where they're looking to pay people to go out and to protest, and they're very much legitimate advertisements. But I absolutely do think the deep state is the reason why we had this attack in New Orleans. I think it's the reason why we have the cartel making plans right now in our country to come and harm Americans. I just think they're the government. If they can't do it legitimately through the government, they're going to come at us another way.
Well, that New Orleans thing, New Orleans is a soft target because of the attitude of the people that live there. Let's face it, if New Orleans didn't have parties and festivals and tourism, what would it be? It would be just another coastal town. You realize that New Orleans is below sea level. And they couldn't even get when they had the floods, the pubs didn't work. Why? In the New Orleans mentality, always put off till tomorrow what you can do today. It's a party town, and that mentality goes through the police departments and administrations. That's how it became a soft target. Like those cameras not working. Why weren't they working? Really, the barricades? What kind of joke is that? And I from the first hour that I saw the interviews down there in New Orleans, I knew that this police she better punch up her resume because she's gone. All these things were happening around her, and she had no knowledge. They had better barricades. She didn't even know they had them. But that's the mentality of New Orleans.
And their DA committed suicide.
And that's not going to change.
Yeah.
Put off tomorrow. Put off till tomorrow what you can do today. That's the problem. And that came back to bite the governor of California in the ass about all those hydrants and why weren't they fixed? Why weren't they prepared? They weren't prepared at all. No. Why?
No.
That's a good question.
They gave a good portion of their funding that would have gone to fighting fires to Ukraine. Yeah. A lot of their fire equipment went to Ukraine. Yeah. They had the opportunity to fill reservoirs, to be more prepared. And what's so funny about this, and I'm sure you know this, Colonel Adams, and many of the listeners know this, is that at first they weren't even using planes to help put out the fire because they said it harms the climate. So they didn't want to use plane. I mean, here's the ocean right here, but they don't want to use the ocean wire to put out the fires because it hurts the climate. And so Canada, at the good graces of Canada, sent down some of those super scoopers, which, by the way, one of them was taken down by a drone, a person unlawfully flying a drone. And, thanks to Canada for saving the day. But, the fire in the Palisades, it's only 7% contained. So, the situation, the fires, it's not anywhere near being over. It is continuing to burn homes. Thousands of homes burned. And I expect quite a few casualties once the situation settles down.
Well, you just came across something else.
Canada and Greenland.
I hate to give the bad guys ideas, but that plane that Canada sent down was incredible. Now, why we don't have those on the West Coast, knowing it's a tinderbox, why don't we have that? And it was taken down by a civilian drone.
Yeah.
You see what I'm going with this?
Mm-hmm.
Give me aircraft, fight the fires, take them down with a drone.
Right.
Just running into them.
Because they don't want this situation to be fixed.
I hate educating the bad guys. But I know you're busy. I'll let you go. But before a couple things, right after the inauguration of Biden, I put my flag upside down because this country's under distress. A legitimate military signal. Help us. We need help. And it's going to stay there until after the inauguration of Donald Trump. And I still repeat this. I hope when I put my flag back up the right way after the inauguration, I don't have to lower it at some time and place to half mast because they've killed our president. But if they do, it won't be a surprise to me. Also, and people say, well, how did you know things were going to get so bad? I said on his first day of signing some of these orders and reversing the policy of 42 on the border, that's insane. And I said then, and I told my wife, I said, I think Biden is a patsy. I think they're going to throw him under the bus. And this is in the first couple of weeks of his inauguration. I said, I think they're going to throw this guy under the bus and blame everything on him once he leaves. Of course, they kicked him out ahead of time because he got caught. And now to find out, his handlers didn't want him in that debate with Trump.
Right.
It was his wife who insisted. How dare you do that to me?
Elder abuse.
Anyway, when I first saw those first laws he passed through executive order, I knew right then and there, we're in big trouble. So I turned my flag upside down. In the Guard, we run our flags upside down. So what initially started out to be a shipwreck with the Biden administration turned into the Titanic. I mean, the everything. I still can't find anything during his administration that he did good for America. And if somebody knows something, when you were on 93 and I was with you then, I asked, is anybody out there do anything that Biden's done? And the only comment was, he's woke us up. Really? We better stay awake because more was coming. And he just one thing after another. I'll be more surprised if we can reverse the damages that he's done with the immigration. That is a very big challenge. The economy for Trump, and he's a businessman. He knows what he's doing. I have total faith in him about the economy. The immigration, that's a toughie. And I said before on your show, I don't know how he can do it without the military. And then sure enough, now he's announced he's going to use the military. I hate now this guy's a Titanic, and he's a disgrace. And there's still commentators out there saying what a great presidency he had. Where have they been?
Who's paying them? That should be the question. Who's paying them to say it?
How could you even say that? I mean, he's a train wreck. He's the Titanic of democracy in this country.
And a criminal on top of that. He's a criminal.
What was my wife's favorite line was when I said, I don't know where I get this stuff, said that his library has no funding now. There's no plans for him to have a presidential library. I said, well, when they do the library, is build an extension on Leavenworth and put it there. That's where it belongs. Hey, thanks for having me. Love you to death. Hi, guys. Allison, hang in there, baby. And hopefully I'll see you next week, okay?
Thank you, Colonel Joe Adams, of course, with the Washington Guard. You can reach out to Colonel Joe Adams with the Washington Guard at WashingtonGuard.com. Make sure you do it. Colonel Adams, man, he's got the answer for everything.
Everybody's asked the same thing. What should we do? Start with join the Guard.
That's right.
I'll answer all your questions. You'll get all the training. Stop asking, what should we do? I've got the answers called the Washington Guard. Thank you. See you next week. And don't forget, we are at war with Islam in this country right now.
We absolutely are. Thank you, Colonel Adams. Have a fantastic day. Stay safe out there. And we'll talk to you next week. Thank you, of course, to Colonel Joe Adams. Check out the WashingtonGuard.com. And even if you don't live in Franklin County, even if you don't live in Missouri, send out an email to the Washington Guard. Go on the website. Ask them, hey, start a branch in my area. I think eventually Colonel Adams, as much as he knows it is, and I know delegating is very hard, and maybe eventually he'll delegate that task out to someone. And hey, I'll volunteer. I'll help in any way that I can to get some of these branches established in other areas, because I'll tell you, we only have ourselves. That's it. We only have ourselves. And if you're not prepared, and I think you all know, we all saw last week, we had one really heavy day of snow. I know some people had a lot of ice. Grocery stores, there were some grocery stores completely sold out. I mean, there wasn't a single thing left and nothing left. It's it's scary. It's a scary situation that we face, that one day, 2 days of snow can wipe out entire grocery stores. That goes to show you, if there was a catastrophe that took place in this country, you cannot count on what's on the shelves at the grocery store. You cannot. And I'll say it now, I'll say it 1,000 times. This is, of course, why they have avian flu and why they want to take away your poultry or your livestock. Cows are the enemy right now. Beef is so bad for you and it's just destroying our planet. They want to tell you, oh, avian flu, if you have any type of, chickens or ducks or turkeys, they're coming for your animals. They are coming for your animals. And why? Because your livestock is your food. They don't want you to be self-sufficient. Just think, I have 6 chickens. I went out yesterday. I haven't been out yet this morning. Got 4 eggs. Most days now that they're, past their molting, 3 to 4 eggs, 5 eggs every single day. And now I don't hatch eggs, but let's say that if I did, not only would I have a steady supply of food, but I would also be growing food for the future if I allowed my chicks to hatch. So, that's why they want to attack. Don't think it's about anything different. Anything that you can do that would be self-sufficient is exactly what they're coming after. And don't think it's any different. And you absolutely must. Now is the time to start thinking about becoming self-sufficient. And I'm already getting plans together for my garden this year. Now that we have Donald Trump elected, I don't have to plan to pack up and leave and just disregard my garden to go to another state. I'm already planning. I'm already getting my winter sowing together. This year, I'm going to try to do 1,000 times more than what I did last year. And last year was my first year gardening. I didn't really know what I was doing. But this year, I'm a little bit more ahead of things. If I can keep that, what is that thing, that powdery mildew away from my garden? Margie, no, I do not. My chickens do not have names. I love my chickens. I don't consider them to be pets. I go out there, I feed them in the morning, I collect eggs. I make sure everything is how it is. Like, here in the wintertime, believe it or not, I make sure they're warm and they have a nice shelter away from the elements. I go back out later in the evening, give them, some scratch grains, make sure they're locked up for the night. And that's it. They're I don't consider them to be pets. And their food is what they are to me. The chickens are their food. They provide food. They're a livelihood in case something happens. And we all need some type of safeguard. That can be a lot of different things for a lot of different people. And I think the answer is in community, which is why the Washington Guard is so important, because you may not have an area where you can have a garden. You may not have an area where you can have chickens or other different types of animals. And you know what? But someone who does, and that's why safety comes in numbers. And Monday, if any of you were here on Monday, we talked quite a bit about terrorism. And the reason why we talked about terrorism is because now this is my own belief. You don't have to agree with me, but I don't think, I do think that the Democrat regime, and I'm not talking about Democrat people, the Democrats in your neighborhood. I'm talking about the cabal, the deep state, whatever, shadow government, whatever you want to call them, the folks headed by Obama. I do absolutely think that the reason why we're seeing this uptick in terror attacks is because the government orchestrates it against the American people. They are not for us, they are against us. And I really do think that the uptick in these attacks is due to our government. We know they've allowed the cartels in, we know they've allowed terrorists into our country. Don't think that was by accident. It's certainly not by accident. They do not care about us. We're all just, we're all collateral damage. So don't ever think of yourself as anything but collateral damage, and survival is up to you, for you and your family. And I do expect we're going to have a lot more terror attacks that take place in this country. I think we have a lot ahead of us, and and you have to prepare for it. It doesn't mean you have to be scared. Like Colonel Adams said, he's not scared, he's just prepared. And if you're prepared, then you don't need to be scared. And Mary says, how do you protect your garden from critters? I don't know, Mary. I haven't figured that out yet. Last year in my garden, I didn't really have too many critters. I had some corn, and I really don't know. I'm going to do a better job this year putting cameras out on my garden. I tried to grow a lot of corn. I planted about 400, corn seeds, and not that many of them grew, because as they started to grow, some animal, unknown animal, would come in and bite the tops off or completely rip them out of the ground. And I would go out and all my corn stalks would just be laying on the ground, pulled out from the root. And this year I'm going to do things different because corn is one of the number ones on my list of things to grow, as well as like green beans. The green beans were my own fault. That wasn't successful for me because I left to go to Georgia right when my green beans were starting to get ready for their harvest, and I just had to leave them, unfortunately. And but this year is going to be a little bit better. I had a lot of problems with powdery mildew, on my tomatoes and my squash. I had more zucchini than I'll ever need, so I'm not going to plant as many zucchini this year. But one of the biggest mistakes I made, and I hope to have some guests as we move forward coming on and talking about gardening and giving some tips, particularly to me because I'm a novice gardener. I've always grown tomatoes and peppers, but I've not really ventured out to too many other things. The only thing I really had this year that was super successful were some of my tomato plants. I planted about 300 tomatoes, but I had a big problem with powdery mildew. My cantaloupes did not grow because of the powdery mildew. Some of my tomatoes got powdery mildew. I tried to go pesticide free, and I tried not to use any chemicals, and I'm gonna have to find a way around all of that this time around. My green beans did grow well. I just wasn't here to do anything. And I have a bazillion pumpkins. As a matter of fact, I still have a bazillion pumpkins, and not even sure what to do with those at this point outside of feeding them to the animals outside. But we have to really start being careful. We've got to start doing our best. And I when I lived in an apartment at one point in the city, I grew container tomatoes. I went to farm stands and bought produce and that type of thing. But I'll tell you, I am convinced that the food we get at the grocery store is largely poison. I am absolutely convinced of it. And, as a matter of fact, I told everybody in my family that, my last days of eating poison are over. And I'm expecting to be sick. You guys might see me next week or the week after not feeling so well on the show because our bodies are filled with poison. And when you start eradicating that poison, and you stop putting that poison into your body reacts. You have to get rid of all those toxins. And I fully expect to be sick. And I expect my body to go through a lot. I expect to be really tired and nauseous and all kinds of other things as my body purges poisons. I'm going to do like a cleanse. I'm going to do a lot of different things to get healthier and to get off the poison. I think that's something we all need to do. And Mr. Parnell, we are going to free range. We are free range cattle. I would like to do that. I don't have enough acres, I don't think, for cattle, and I don't think I have a proper system in place for that. But I would love to do that. I do plan on buying some meat, some beef from a local farmer. That's something I have in the works. And there's a lot of things we can do, to protect ourselves. And before we head out, there were a couple other things I wanted to talk about really quick. And one of those things, I want to go back to the Los Angeles area fires. And the reason why is because if these fires they're not good. Karen, you also have a good weekend. Their fires are not over yet. And they're, the Palisades fire, 7% contained. If you guys have seen the destruction that took place, and one thing I want to explain, a lot of people have sent me messages. They're like, okay, well, why are the trees still green? The grass is still green and the shrubs are still green, but the house is completely decimated. And that actually happens because of embers. And when these fires begin, the wind, especially with heavy wind, they're throwing embers all over the place. And so let's say an ember lands on a tree. Well, then that tree catches on fire. Now that tree might spurt out more embers that catch other things on fire. And let's say an ember lands on a house. Well, then that house will catch on fire. You can go and you can see videos of people putting out fires, little fires at a time by the embers. And some people actually were managed to save their homes because they were able to tackle these embers one at a time and were, believe it or not, successful in saving their homes. But then you have other areas like the part of the other Palisades fire where the homes were so close together. If you see that area, because the homes were so close together, one home just ignited the other one, and it took out hundreds of homes in one community, just in one big sweep. And you see where there's no vegetation in that area, no homes, no nothing, completely wiped out. And again, I really do think that when they estimate the final count in damage, I really think right now they're saying about 50 billion. I'm going to say it's probably going to be closer to 200 billion. And it could even reach higher than that. When you figure David Gevens's house is 85 million that was lost in this fire. These are some of the wealthiest neighborhoods. And also, as we talked about earlier, some of these neighborhoods were slated already to become smart cities. It was already a plan in the works to turn some of these areas into smart cities. And just like Lahaina, just like Helene out in North Carolina, all of these different situations led to what? To one thing: people not being able to rebuild on their land. The people in Lahaina now, in Hawaii, things are a little bit different. You don't own the land you build your house on. That is owned by the government and, by the natives. So you don't own the land there. So that's a tiny bit different. In North Carolina, as I said earlier in the show, people lost their homes to mudslides, to flooding, to hurricane conditions. And guess what? Now they can't rebuild. FEMA has come in and they said, you know what? It is not safe to rebuild in this area. I'll bet you they say the exact same thing in California. And now in California, in North Carolina, I don't agree with that assessment. I think people can absolutely rebuild because what are those, 1,000-year flood? It doesn't happen very often. And I think there are ways to be able to support those homes. Now, California, on the other hand, they are prone to these wildfires. How many times are we going to rebuild homes? Some of these people who lost their homes now have lost their home before. I heard an interview. One person lost her home twice before in a wildfire in California. Now, of course, a lot of these people are saying, hey, I'm out of here. I'm taking my money and I'm going. Will they get money from the insurance company? And let's just say that the folks who are still insured, I know it was who was it? State Farm, a couple other insurance companies said they canceled these policies a long time ago because they knew that these homes were in a high risk area for fire. So some of these policies will not be paying out. I have no idea how these people are going to rebuild. And Joe says, zero coincidence. I completely agree. Abe says, are blue homes still standing? I don't know. I don't think there's a lot of blue homes in the Los Angeles area, but I will tell you, I saw a photo of a blue trash can next to a burned out area, and the blue trash can was completely undamaged. Now, again, it could just be that it wasn't in an area, of embers. But, I think that these things are happening for a reason. I do not think the fires in the Los Angeles area were coincidence. I mean, I by natural elements, I think it is absolutely arson. I consider it to be terrorism. I think that we're going to find that people started these fires, if not all of them, then the majority of them, I do believe, were started by people, arsonists, domestic terrorists, whatever you might, an Antifa. And in the end, I think our government's behind it. And it's really sad to say that our government would want to harm us Americans, but I certainly believe they have and do and will continue to do that. Dave says, Joe Biden said he is paying 100% for cars and all. Oh, well, he better not. No offense against the people in California, but what about the people in North Carolina? What about the people in Lahaina? They're American citizens too. What about their vehicles? What about their homes? What about everything that they have? And, there's a lot to this, and we're certainly going to find out more as time goes. Margie says many celebrities have more than one home, summer homes, beach homes, etc. Absolutely true. And, a lot of these areas, Pacific Palisades, that's more of a residential area where people live, mostly full time. Some of the people I know in Malibu, their Malibu beach house is their second home, and they have homes in Beverly Hills or Bel Air or up in the Hollywood Hills. But I don't think it's any coincidence that we had fire starting in all these wealthy areas. Malibu, as a matter of fact, in Malibu, where my friend actually lives, is the wealthiest suburb of the entire country. And it's filled with celebrities on his street. I spent some time there, and I'm not even going to get into all the people I ran into because it was insane. And thank God at this point his home is still standing. But there's no coincidence that these fires happened in very wealthy areas. For one, the property. Think about how much that land is worth with no homes on it. And particularly the beach homes. The government, they don't want all those houses on the beach. They don't get tourism dollars when the beach is filled with private homes. They want to turn that into money. You can't do that when you have people living there. And some of these homes have been there since the 30s, 1930s, 1940s, and they've never been able to profit from these homes. Mary says Biden is such a moron. Yes, yes, he is. And and I feel for these people. My family had a house fire back in 2003, and I've said it before. Some of my brother was burned very, very badly. My stepfather, the only thing he had was the underpants he was sleeping in. Thank God, they both survived. It was a really tough situation, and I'll tell you, I got a call that night about the fire, and I jumped up, I took off, I hurried up and drove over to the house. And the house was fully engulfed in flames. And I just happened to know one of the firefighters that was there, and he came over and he's like, you know what, we just life flighted your brother over to the burn unit. Back then it was at St. John's, and your stepfather, he's in the hospital, really just down the road. And I thought, it's like, what do you do? What do you do? And the first thing I thought, well, okay, well, I'm going to go see my stepfather first, because obviously my brother's in the helicopter. But at no point did I think, when that house was on fire, like, oh my gosh, all the stuff. Never once did I think about all the stuff. It was always about lives. And I apologize if I seem distracted. Since I've been standing here for like the past 20 minutes, I have sensors all over my house, sensors in the driveway, sensors out in the back, and my sensors keep going off, and I keep hearing all these beeps and dings, and I'm thinking, what is happening outside of my home? So I'm probably going to cut things short here in just a minute to go out and investigate to see what in the world is happening, and why my sensors are all going off. I don't think it's anything terror related or dangerous, but maybe I honestly don't know. But I'm going to go find out here in a few minutes. Dottie says, you have to admit the view of Malibu Beach without homes is beautiful. And Dottie, that's exactly what I believe the government wants. Is they want that beach area to be clear of homes. And people are going to say, oh, you can't blame the government for everything, but I do. Because I do think that groups like Antifa, they're funded by George Soros, who just won the Presidential Medal of Freedom. Did he deserve that? No. Will Donald Trump rescind it? I hope so. And Donald Trump, of course, going to be sentenced today. Allegedly, that'll be held up in appeals. I don't really see that as being a big issue. And before I do head out to find out what in the world is happening, and Dave says snow. Dave, snow doesn't set off my sensors. I've never had them set off by snow before. So I don't know what's going on, but I'll find out here momentarily. Maybe deer. I don't think there's that many deer in the yard, but I will. It's nothing nefarious. I promise you that. There's some reasonable explanation as to why my sensors are going off, but I'll find out what it is. But Trump, if you guys have noticed, he's not giving up on the idea. I don't know where the concept of taking over Greenland in Canada came from. It just like popped up, and I know it has a lot to do with the fact that we subsidize Canada and we give a lot of money to Greenland. Denmark doesn't do a very good job taking care of Greenland. And of course, Donald Trump Jr. being there the other day. Allison, you also have a safe weekend. Margie says critters. It could be critters, but if it is, it's an awful lot of them, because it's like the front dings and the back dings. And I'm like, something is going on. Maybe if it's really giant snowflakes or something along those lines. I will soon find out. But, we're going to find out a little bit more about Canada and Greenland. I think it's funny because Elon Musk yesterday made the funniest comment, because on X, Trudeau, who of course, technically has offered his resignation. He's done. He said, hey, it'll never happen. The United States will never acquire Canada, blah, blah, blah. And it was kind of funny because Elon Musk responded back. He said, girl, oh, that I thought was really funny. He said, girl, you're not even what did he call it? You're not even the something of Canada anymore. I can't remember what he said, but it was pretty darn funny. And, people are really hitting back in other countries. We have some people in Greenland who say, I would love to become part of the United States. I would love it. And then we have other people saying, not in a million years. We want to be under the rule of Denmark. But a lot of people in Greenland, they seem to think that Denmark doesn't take very good care of them. They're kind of off the radar. They have bad healthcare systems, and their livelihood is not what it should be. Canada, I know a lot of Canadians. I know a lot of particularly hockey players that are from Canada, and they're good patriots, great people. They love their country. I really don't think that these people want Canada to be part of the United States, and I can't say I blame them. They want to be a sovereign nation of their very own, and I think they deserve that right. But we'll see how it all plays out, because I'll tell you what, I don't think that Trump is going to give up the idea of Canada and and Greenland being part of the United States. I don't think he's going to give it up that easily. And while it seems like a joke right now, I don't think it's a joke to him at all. And I think he could be looking at his legacy, because adding Canada and Greenland to the United States would be something that, we haven't taken over a new territory in a very long time. And, I guess what would be the last? Puerto Rico and Guam, I'm assuming. And I have to go back and look at my history lessons for that information. But it would be something that would go down in history. I don't see it happening. I feel for the people of Canada who probably don't want it to happen. They deserve to have their own free country. Mary says, I like the idea of changing the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. Now, I'm in favor of that. I'm not in favor of taking over Canada or Greenland, but I'm certainly in favor of the Gulf of America. And, it'll be interesting to see how all of that plays out. One of the other things I wanted to touch base on really quick are drones. The drones have not gone away. We're looking at the other shiny object, but in the meantime, the drones are still there. It is still an issue. People are still taking videos of drones. They're still becoming a large problem in this country. They stopped talking about them. They stopped talking about it, but they're still there. And I wish I would have had time today. I was going to load up a video. I'll have to do that next week to talk about the drones. And Trump made a statement, this week, where he said, I don't understand why the government's not telling the people about the drones. I think they need to. And as soon as I'm in office, I'm going to, talk to American citizens about exactly what's going on with the drones. So I think we're going to have answers sooner rather than later. Dave in St. Louis says Canada is just going to pay tariffs. Greenland will be ours. Well, Dave, if I had to speculate, I would have to agree with you. I do think that Donald Trump is going to work out a deal for Greenland. I don't know how soon that's going to happen. Canada, I don't see Canada ever being part of the United States. I do see Greenland as being coming to fruition. I think there's a lot of reasons why. I don't think we'll take it by force. A lot of people are talking about that. I don't expect that to happen. So that's something, we'll continue to talk about next week. We'll continue to talk about the war on terrorism. We're going to continue to talk about becoming self-sufficient and how we get through this, very trying time ahead of us, because I don't want to go as far as saying we're at war with Islam. I think that we're at war with our own government. It's not Islam, it's our own government. And if you go out and you talk to Muslims in your community, I have friends that are Muslim. They love America. They absolutely love our country. They love their freedom. They want the same things that we want. But then you have the radicalism, and they're scared of the radicals as much as we are. The Muslims I know are terrified of radicalism. They don't want any part of it. And they say that's not Islam. But I'll tell you who funds radicalism, and that's us, the United States, and the entire world knows it. Americans are just kind of waking up to it. But when you see these terror attacks in our country, you have to ask, who funded it? Who's funding this? Who's paying for the online radicalization? Who's giving money to the mosques? As I stated before, Hillary Clinton, Joe Biden, both received an awful lot of money from some wealthy folks who belong to the mosque in Beaumont, Texas. And I talked about that many years ago. It's not new information. I talked about this back in 2016. I had a whole show about it, back then with Hillary Clinton. And there's a lot going on in our country. But, again, I don't see it as a war with Islam. I see it as a war, with the deep state. We'll continue to talk about that. Robert says anything less than 18% tariff just negates the VAT tax rebates at the foreign sources. And then Joe says we are at war against our own government. You're exactly right. And Joe also says, I hope we get Greenland. We very well may do that. We very well may do so. Well, that's about all I have for you guys today. I've got to run out and see what's going on outside. My sensors are still going off. I don't know. Maybe I don't even have an answer, but it's nothing nefarious, nothing to worry about. Probably weather related or critter related, or who knows. Maybe trees are falling. I don't know, but we'll find out. Either way, I hope you guys have a really fantastic weekend. I know we're having some bad weather today. It is snowing like crazy at my house. It probably is at your house also. So stay warm, stay safe. If you can, please stay off the roads. The one thing we don't want to do is make the situation harder for first responders. I know it's Friday and a lot of people are at work. I got very lucky today that I didn't have to travel into the city today to work. But be safe out there, stay warm this weekend, be careful, start getting your plans in order for your garden. I would be more than happy to answer any questions you have. I'm not the garden expert, but I can at least tell you some of my resources. And if you have any guests you'd like to see come on the show to talk about gardening or to talk about community or anything of interest to you, I would love to have them. You guys all know how to reach out to me. I hope again you have a fantastic weekend. I'm Tabitha Hassell with Tabs on Tap.